Hello everyone, I'm Ben Stemrick, and this is the follow-up question. On Wednesday, Council held a special meeting for the Finance Department budget review, but what everyone really came out for was Council making a decision on whether or not to give American Rescue Plan funding to the Vinci Science Center's new Allentown facility and the Lehigh Valley IronPigs minor league baseball team. Both organizations were asking for $1.5 million. Over the past few months, Council has held special meetings on what the city would spend what's left of its one-time $57 million in funding. However, the Da Vinci Center and IronPigs both requested that their projects bypass the process all other entities would have to go through because their projects are shovel-ready. Some council members were for giving the money, others against, and some took issue with the skipping of the process. Regardless, those projects were voted on 2 special meetings and moved forward to be voted on by council, and that's what happened during this meeting. Now remember, a couple weeks ago, Councilmember Ed Zuckel told us right here on the follow-up question that he didn't think those motions were going to pass. But after some back and forth, Council voted on giving the Da Vinci Science Center $1 million in ARPA funding, and that motion passed 7-0. Councilmember C.C. Gerlach has been the most outspoken against these projects getting funding before going through the process. We spoke with her about why she voted yes, and we'll have that later. But this Wednesday was Council Member Candida Affa, who in the past showed support for both projects. That was the vote that would be the deciding factor, and she knew it.
On the dais wants a community center. That's going to cost millions of dollars. That's for the children. Those are funds that we're able to give if we don't give to other ones. If we give $1 million, I'd be willing to give $1 million to Vinci Center and 0 to the pigs. If that's what we're looking at, the children and the community and things like this, it's the Lehigh Valley. Someone pointed that out. It's the Lehigh Valley pigs. This is the Allentown thing, and this is so confusing. It's very difficult for us. And everybody brought up children. I was listening intently, and what they said about the children, this Da Vinci Center is going to be great for them. But also, we're talking about a community center that we want to build for the children. So all of this stuff we're talking about, that our community and our children, yes, I'll go for the $1 million for Da Vinci, but I don't want to give anything to the pigs then.
And that is just what happened. 4-3, Council ended up voting against giving the IronPigs any money at all. This has long been a fear of fans of the IronPigs, and we've heard team officials say multiple times that if the team didn't get the funding, Major League Baseball would force them to move to a different city. But it wasn't even 24 hours until we heard the IronPigs and Lehigh County would work together to make up the gap in funding. In a joint statement, they say, Lehigh County and the IronPigs are committed to continuing to work together to close the remaining funding gap on the current construction project underway at Coca-Cola Park. The IronPigs have signed a lease extension to play in Lehigh County's Coca-Cola Park through the 2052 season, and the current construction will allow the IronPigs to meet MLB's facility standards. We spoke with Lehigh County Executive Phillips Armstrong about the decision to make up the funding. Take a look.
It's never been a question of whether we would lose the IronPigs or not. You know, many people are saying, well, why don't the Phillies step up here? It's not owned by the Phillies. You know, it's a franchise. So the owners yesterday met with us. We agreed they're going to step up. They're going to help out now. We're looking at ways. I met into the evening last night. We're meeting again today. We've got to find some pennies here and some pennies there, but construction's already begun. So it was never a question. As I said yesterday, it hurt that Allentown, who we feel have benefited greatly over the years from the IronPigs, and we've never asked Allentown for a penny. It hurt that those 4 council members voted against it because, you know, the mayor and the former mayor all along had said, you know, this was what they thought would be a great use of the American Rescue Funds. And the American Rescue Funds, they needed rescuing, So because maybe this wouldn't have been an issue if we didn't have COVID, but we had a no season, so they had no income. Then the next season, we had a close, not as long season, which cut the income. So it's brought about some financial hardships for the ownership. I certainly don't want to be the county executive that ends up owning a stadium without a team. Mm-hmm. And that's the bottom line is we have a beautiful stadium, Major League Baseball, and you can argue all you want about Major League Baseball throwing at it these requirements. It's a moot point. You can't do anything about it. It's like when the United States Supreme Court makes a ruling. You may not like it, but you have to live with it. You have to adjust. Mm-hmm. So they told us this is what has to happen in the stadium. So we're going to make sure that happens. And hey, we have some great partners here. The IronPigs are partnering. The state of Pennsylvania is helping us. Northampton County is pitching in, and the stadium isn't even in their county. So, we were expecting some help from Allentown, but it is what it is. So we're going to just find other ways.
I imagine you were talking to those council members. That the fact that MLB was saying, this has to get done, but then on the other hand, the IronPigs are saying, well, we're not the MLB or the Phillies, it's completely separate. Isn't that kind of contradictory to say, well, MLB gets to make this call, but then they don't get the accountability?
Well, again, whatever it is, it is. And because of COVID, a number of minor league teams did go out. They're out. So there are empty stadiums now. From what I heard, it's over 40 empty stadiums that are looking for a minor league team. So they have you, they really have you over a barrel. If you don't want to do it, there are stadiums out there that are begging and will do whatever it takes to get that team. So my pledge is we're going to do whatever it takes. We're not going to lose that team.
I reached out to the IronPigs. They say the total cost of the renovations is going to be about $10 million. So far, the IronPigs have contributed $2 million, Lehigh County $4 million, Northampton County $200,000, and $2.5 million came from the state. I had a chance to talk with Councilmember Cece Gerlach, who was the lead voice of opposition on both of these projects getting funding at this point, and I asked her why she voted yes for one and no for the other.
Last night was a meeting I think a lot of people have been waiting a long time for with bated breath and really wasn't sure what was going to happen. I think when you asked most people, they would have guessed that the IronPigs were going to walk away with $1.5 million in ARPA funding. A couple weeks ago, I spoke with he said that might not be the first time I heard that. Talk to me about how everything kind of switched from feeling one thing and now it going the other way.
Right. I think the game changer was when the county allocated $3 million to the IronPigs for the stadium that they own. I think that was the game changer, and that really made a couple people on council to really, think twice about giving them money, especially when you think about the need in Allentown. Some folks want to hire more police officers. That's a lot of money. We have a huge issue with homelessness in Allentown. That's a lot of money. Affordable housing, gun violence prevention, the list goes on. So I think really leading up to, I was in conversation with council members, at least one, up until about 20 minutes before the meeting started. There was a lot of conversation.
Those conversations that are happening right up until that, do they feel as contentious as sometimes the meetings do?
No. I think we all understand that we don't all have to like each other. We don't all have to agree. And we can have different opinions. And that's okay. I mean, I have had really in-depth conversations about the IronPigs and Vinci and other issues with people who are diametrically opposed. Like, we will probably not be voting for the same president. We will not be voting for the same governor. but we can have conversations. Now, when you're in the public, things change. The dynamic changes a little bit. The energy changes. You have members of the public there, and you have the media there. So I've it changes things.
A lot of this was revolved around the process of handing out this ARPA money and how these two projects, because it wasn't just the Iron Pigs, it was also the Da Vinci Science Center's new building down in Allentown that was asking for similar amounts earlier than other projects that are going through the process that was initially set. If the Iron Pigs were to have followed that process, would the outcome or could the outcome have been different?
Um, if there was a transparent process for them to follow, potentially the outcome could have been different. But maybe not, because I think at the end of the day, it was more a question of fiscal responsibility, paying for upgrades on a stadium that we don't own. Meanwhile, we have dire life and death needs that wouldn't have changed, even if they would have followed the process. For me, when you talk about process, something that's interesting is last night. The night before the meeting, we finally got the applications, and we didn't even get the rubrics that were used. We just got the summary of the rubric. I asked who was on the scoring committee. Seemed like no one knew initially, and then they said some names or positions that I guess were on the scoring committee. I don't know. We didn't know that there was a scoring committee. I'm not sure if any other applications were even received. So it's I find it, interesting that I remember the article where the mayor put out a press release and said, hey, send your applications in, and that these are the only applications that have been sent in. The process goes completely through the mayor's office. According to what the press release said months ago, one must call the mayor's office up and have a conversation with one of his staff. I guess apparently before even getting an application. If you look at Da Vinci's application, I don't know if that's been made public yet, and I don't know if it can be. But Da Vinci's application was 109 pages, and then the Iron Pigs application was in a Google Doc, but wouldn't equate to more than 10 pages. And it just makes me wonder, were they filling out the same application? If one person is submitting financials and staff demographic breakdowns and salaries, and the other isn't, it just makes me wonder if they were answering questions on the same application.
A few months ago, it seemed like you had the same questions for both of these organizations, and maybe I'm wrong on this. You can speak to this. It seemed like Da Vinci had come to you with answers more and was more willing to have that conversation. Now, I know you mentioned the two plans that came in last night. Was that the first time you really saw these things from the Iron Pigs?
Yeah, so this was the first time that we have seen either of the actual applications. But in terms of being responsive to questions and concerns, not only from members of council, but also from the community, because those of us who live downtown especially, or people who are in the Black or brown community who are used to having their neighborhoods taken over and gentrified, we know what it means when you build a shiny new building. That ain't for us. So we were quick. And when I say we, I mean the community was quick to sit down and meet with Da Vinci and hold them accountable. And I would say Lynn Erickson has been held accountable. She has responded to community need. And I applaud her for that, which is why it was so challenging to not initially say yes to the 1.5 or even the million, just because my hesitancy came from the lack of process, the lack of transparency. It had nothing to do with the strength of their application, because their application was strong and they have responded to community need. I am 100% confident that as long as the Vinci continues to work with the community, we will have a significant number of Allentown residents working in the Da Vinci Center at various level jobs, not just serving popcorn. We will have collaborations with the Allentown School District to get our young people into the STEM fields. I am more than confident based on what I've seen so far.
And you did vote yes on $500,000 for Da Vinci. It sounded like that's not a final number, and there's potential through grants and revisiting the ARPA funding down the road if need be, that they could potentially get more. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that weighed into the decision.
Right. So initially I moved to do 250,000. That failed. And then Candida, she made a motion for 500,000. That passed. But then Daryl, he went and he did another amendment, and it went back to $1 million. So, and I ended up saying yes. There were a lot of members of the community who were there who I respect. And some of them have had opportunities to engage with Da Vinci. They may even be on the advisory board. And some of them are the very people who would be hired, maybe. They live in the community, they're bilingual. So from my perspective, listening to them and looking at the strength of their application, I didn't want Da Vinci to suffer because of the lack of due diligence by those who set the process or lack thereof up.
In just the past hour or so, the IronPigs and Lehigh County had put out a joint statement essentially saying that they're going to do everything they can to keep the IronPigs in Lehigh County and in the Lehigh Valley. This coming right after her last night's meeting kind of validates what you were saying there, and a lot of the stuff that you were saying revolved around the belief that the county was going to end up picking up this tab because they couldn't afford to lose it. Talk to me about that and how their announcement today, does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I knew this. If you own a property and there is an entity above you that is telling you that you must make improvements to that property or you will no longer be allowed to operate, you're going to make improvements to that property or you're going to lose that property. It is in the county's financial interests to keep that property operating. And I'm not like a CEO, but I know enough about business to know that when you run a business, there will be things that happen, and that you have to adjust. And sometimes you might have to seek outside help, a loan, borrowing money. And that's what the IronPigs are. They are a business. And my understanding is that the county is, extending their lease and then making the terms of the lease a little bit more favorable to the county, to the taxpayers. So we don't even have that ability to like negotiate to that level because we have no financial stake in that stadium. The county does. Coming from council, yeah. I mean, if the administration wants to give them extra money after the county does, I guess that's a decision that they can make. But I think now that this is over with, we can now get into the rest of the ARPA money and how we will invest in people in neighborhoods instead of corporations. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing, talking about affordable housing, homelessness, gun violence prevention, a youth center. Those are the conversations I'm looking forward to now that this is done.
This meeting did end up being a long one. It took about 2.5 hours. Most of it, council was discussing and forming the city's budget. Now, that's still several weeks away from being done, and when it is, we will break down where the city is going to be spending its money. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Follow-Up Question. The next meeting is set for November 2nd, and we'll be watching so you don't have to. I'm Ben Stamrick. You can find me at Ben Stem News, and you can subscribe to The Follow-Up Question right here on YouTube. Thanks for paying attention.